So hello, everyone. I'm Joan Meyer. I teach the Domestic Violence Project Clinic, and I'm going to tell you a bit about it, and then Dan, who was a student last fall of 2020, is also going to talk about his experience. So the Domestic Violence Project Clinic is the third clinical model that I've taught since I've been at GW, which is an ungodly 30 years. I taught a litigation clinic. I taught an emergency department, sort of crisis intervention clinic for battered women. And then I developed the Domestic Violence Project, and it is by far my favorite clinical teaching model. It is a hybrid of a clinic and an outside placement. Right now, this may change in the future, but you have to actually apply to field placement to do your placement work for the clinic, and you get ungraded credits for that. And then you get graded credits for the course itself, which is a seminar plus a bunch of other related requirements. The model of having students placed in the field to do their domestic violence legal work has turned out to be fabulous on many levels. One of them is that it really allows students to learn what it's like to be a domestic violence lawyer in the real world. They're working closely with real DV lawyers, and they are seeing it in real time. And many of my students have talked about how relieved they are to have experienced a job, an employment situation that they actually felt comfortable in and really liked. And it's the first time that that's happened since they've entered law school. So it's a great opportunity to dip your feet in and find out what you like. What you don't like is also equally valuable. The other thing is that students learn from each other a lot about the things they're not doing. So some students are prosecuting, some students are doing civil stuff, some students are doing legislative policy work, and they're learning from each other about what's going on in these different placements and different work contexts, and they often can help each other in different settings. And then lastly, it's also a great opportunity. I hope you guys can edit this because it's a chance to, it's better than the average outside placement in the sense, in my view, in the sense that it's a really great kind of laboratory to learn to process your experiences and to dig deep into what you're learning, both in the class and in the placement, and to meld those two. So there's a really great chance to blend theory and practice here, which I think in regular placements, you don't have a focused seminar like mine, which is taught by an expert, where the teacher really knows the practice and can really engage with you on a deep level around that. Okay, so that's sort of the big shtick about why it's a great model. More specifically, let me tell you a little bit about the types of placements. It's a really wide variety because we're lucky to be in DC, where there's tons of different public interest and domestic violence work being done. But just to give you a sense of the options, one option that students always are interested in is to be certified as a prosecutor in the Maryland State's Attorney's offices. Sometimes certified, sometimes not. There's a lot of good work to be done, even if you're not appearing in court, but some students get to do that and do their own trials. There's work with civil legal aid organizations like the Legal Aid Society or the Network for Victim Recovery of DC, which does a really interesting variety of DV advocacy work, including they do some work on campus sexual assault, as well as domestic violence protection orders. There's the opportunity to learn about immigration and DV at a place like IUTA or Tahirih Justice Center, or the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center. I usually have students at one or more of those placements every semester. And there's a chance to alternatively work on public policy and legislation and or research and technical assistance for judges and others at places like Legal Momentum or the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and then local policy work at the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is a placement my students have really loved as well. There's opportunities to litigate to protect children, as Dan will tell you about, in the custody context. You could do protection order litigation, teen domestic violence, etc. It's a really broad community, and I really help you find the placement that's right for you. Let me say a few words about the class itself. It's a weekly seminar devoted to just a series of different key topics in the field, such as DV 101, civil protection orders, custody and domestic violence, prosecution of domestic violence, immigration and domestic violence. And then there's also 3 classes that are devoted specifically to skill development. And what I like about that, and I think the students do too, is that it really helps them in their field work. I've had placement supervisors say to me, how come your students are so much better at writing motions? And I'm like, there's a reason for that. So there's 3 skills classes. One of them is interviewing and counseling, where students role play those roles. One of them is motion drafting, where everyone is involved in drafting, and then we sort of take apart and put back together a lot of the choices that were made in the drafting in class. And the third one is about appellate advocacy, that's based around a real case that I worked on when I was doing appellate work. In addition to the weekly class, there are journals that students write that are private and confidential. They have to be shared with me. And they're a great opportunity for me to do my mentoring that I like to do with students, to support them in their field work and in whatever's coming up for them in relation to the work, because the work can be emotionally stressful as well as just generally stressful in some ways. And so I think the learning is deepened by the journal exchanges that we have. And then we also have small groups which meet only 4 times a semester, where 4 students can come together with me to talk about what's going on in placements and troubleshoot with each other. And it's a nice kind of relationship building and a chance to kind of take apart a little bit more hands-on what's going on in the field work. The last requirement for the class is a final project or paper, and I really encourage all kinds of projects as long as they're useful or meaningful artistically. And many students also do research papers, and that's a chance to focus on an issue that may really interest you that is not covered in the class and or in your field work, but it's something you want to know more about. Or it could be something that was covered in the class. I think it's been a great model, but and I think students have really enjoyed it, but I will now turn it over to Dan to tell you more.
And thank you for that summary. Yeah, Professor, I would confirm that students have really enjoyed it, because I am one student who really enjoyed it. So hi, my name's Daniel Robinson. I am a 2L here at George Washington University, and you know, you're looking at my face right now because I was in the DVP project and I loved it so much that I want to convince you to take it. I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made in law school. So first, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the seminar aspect of the course, of the clinic, sorry. And so the great thing about the seminar, first of all, there's the technical aspects to it. I think Joan sort of gave a very good outline, but just to highlight some of the stuff that I thought was really interesting, you know, you get to work on, you know, various, you know, motions for protective orders. You get to also, you know, learn that technical aspect and also sort of discuss like, you know, well, how would you work with a client who, you know, has you know, suffered abuse? Like, what are sort of the emotional skills that you need to navigate that space? And that is, you know, immensely helpful, because, you know, law school will teach you a certain way to work with clients that doesn't necessarily apply in this context. And so, you know, having that opportunity to work through that is, you know, it will serve you, you know, out in the real world. You know, also I'll say one of the great things about the seminar part is, you know, domestic violence touches on a lot of different areas of the law. And you'll get to be alongside various students who are in a wide array of practice areas. And so bring a lot of different perspectives to the background, but at the same time, you all share a common interest in, you know, addressing this dire issue, you know, in our society. And that mix of different perspectives, but also just like general camaraderie you have in the group, I think is, you know, it's something you're not going to find in a lot of places in law school. So, you know, you will make lasting relationships there. Just to speak about the, you know, the placement aspect, you know, Professor Meyer will do you a great service in, you know, helping you find a place that fits your interests. So I came into law school as an aspiring prosecutor. That's what I was interested in. And part of that was, I'm very passionate about advocating for children and, protecting children from abuse and neglect. It's something that matters a lot to me. Um, so, you know, Professor Meyer actually encouraged me to steer off the path of prosecutor for a moment and work with Child Justice, which is an organization that, you know, represents parents, in protective order hearings and other settings, with the goal of, protecting children who are being abused. And I will say it was one of the most important experiences in my life because, or in my life as a student, because you come in with the perception that like if there's allegations of serious child abuse, the courts will handle everything, and no, it's actually it's very unsettling, some of the things that happen, but at the same time, I got to work directly with practitioners to represent clients and protect children and do really meaningful work and learn at the same time. One of the great things about the field placement aspect of this course is you will be placed with actual attorneys. And if you're passionate and interested in the field those attorneys work in, you will find, like, I guess the best term I can come up with is like, kindred spirits almost. And that is both an incredible learning opportunity and an incredible networking opportunity for you as a student. So you will obviously have to, do a lot of work for your supervisors, do a lot of work, in your field placement, and that pairs very well with the course. I don't think it's at all too much work. I know that some students might be concerned about the workload, but I find since often what you're learning in a class translates directly to what you're doing in the field, it doesn't feel too burdensome. Um, and I guess finally I'll speak to something that I was a little hesitant about going into the domestic violence project. I remember initially I was very concerned, working with, abused and battered women, as, the gender dynamics, being, a male in that space. And, perhaps it would be more appropriate, for women to work with women who have been abused. But I found that wasn't the case. You will find that, well, one, I didn't find that anyone was ever uncomfortable with my gender. I also found that, if it was an issue, my supervisors would be very sensitive to that. And, regardless of, the person across the table from you, there's always a human connection to be made. And if you're the kind of person who, doesn't shrink from that opportunity to, reach across the table and help someone, superficial things like your gender won't really prevent you from doing that. Is there anything I missed?
No, I think that's really good, Dan. I just want to put a point on it and say that I've actually had clients who loved having men represent them, male students, and in your case, you have a male supervisor too. But they love it because it's a vindication that what their abuser's been telling them as a male dominating a female is wrong. Here's a man standing up to that and saying it's wrong and it's not what real men do, and that she's worthy. So it can be very healing in a way to have a male advocate, but you're right. It depends on the content of the abuse and the person and personalities of everybody involved. But I've very rarely had women clients who needed to not have male advocates. So.
And of course, on the topic of being, a trauma-informed lawyer and working with your client, that's something you'll learn about in the clinic. And so, just to anyone who's trying to decide which clinic they want to take, if you're someone who's passionate about, advocating for, battered women and children, if you have a public interest bent and you're just trying to figure out exactly where you want to land, and, if you want to get real experience with real attorneys, honestly, this is the best clinic for you, I think.
Yeah, I will just thank you, Dan. I'm going to add one last thing about placements. Some people don't want to litigate, and there are some great placements that are not litigation placements. So that's one of the great things about the model that the DVP follows.